If you think about it, every single thing you do, every business that's created, the classrooms that you sit in, the movies you watch, your leisure time, somebody has taken time, or should have taken more time perhaps, to design that experience, that interaction that you're having. Sometimes they do a great job of this, sometimes they do not. As young students, you also get to design your own experiences and your own interactions with the world and the choices that you make. And so all of us, in whatever we do, are consumers of experiences and we are creators of experiences. And we can do a good job of that, we can care about it, we can think about how we're affecting other people, or we can just kind of blindly move through it. 11 years ago, I had never spent a single day working in a restaurant at all. I went to Glenbrook North High School. I graduated. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I went to Colgate University. I started out as an econ major because I knew I had an interest in business. I met an awesome philosophy professor who just turned 91 years old, still teaches. And he took me under his wing and told me I'm a logician and a philosophy of language major. And what do you do with that, right? So I did a whole bunch of stuff with it. It's not linear. But when I got out, I became enamored of the Chicago markets. I became a trader at the Mercantile Exchange. I first took a $6 an hour job down there. I started trading options on currencies a year to the day later and built a firm of about 100 people out of that, never taking more than $40,000 in investment. We grew that to over a $100 million a year company. At 32 years old, I became unenamored of that. I quit for reasons that have a lot to do with my wife saying I was becoming a bit jerky and short-tempered. Little did she know that was probably just ingrained in me at the time. But all of a sudden I found myself in a very fortunate position in one sense where I had done very well at a young age, and at the same time I had to reinvent again because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I still really didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And that's when I walked into a restaurant in Evanston, Illinois called Trio. I met Grant Achatz when he was 28 years old, and despite my Greek last name and the fact that this whole city is run by Greek diners, I had no interest in the restaurant business at all. And so I went to Trio and had my eyes opened and had an experience where it was incredibly detailed, incredibly well thought out, and this guy comes out and he's this 28-year-old kid from Michigan, and he's like, so how do we do? And he just sat there, and he looked like central casting of someone who is not a chef. He was not some big, chubby, fat French dude who was just shoveling food. He was an intellectual. And so it was like, the analogy I like to use is like, it was like meeting Miles Davis when he's 25. It's like he's playing different music. He's got his back to the stage. He's quiet. And if we built the right stage, then cool things are going to happen, and the world's going to listen eventually. They're going to figure it out. So 11 years ago, I began building a restaurant, having no knowledge of how to build a restaurant. Grant came by my house. He asked me what kind of restaurant I want to build. I said, I have no idea. I've never built a restaurant before. But I had belief in him. Weirdly, he had some belief in me, and we set about building a restaurant. So what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about how we did that and how that applies more broadly to everything. We started out, that's me, believe it or not, and that's Grant in my dining room in 2004, putting together the business plan that we built ourselves, that we were going to mail out to potential investors. We needed to raise about $2 million. None of us had built a restaurant before, and at that meeting, the very first meeting that we had, he said to me, Nick, I said, like, what do you want this to look like? He said, do you know why fancy restaurants have tablecloths? Anybody? Is it luxurious? It hides the table, because underneath every one of those tables is a crappy piece of plywood with a pad on it. You could go to some of the best restaurants in the world, and it hides the table. And he said, intuitively, when you put your hands on that, when you feel it move, when you feel it not being strong under your hands, you know that someone didn't care about that. And he said, I want great tables. So our very first thing that we did, that's Alinea 11 years ago. which as we found it. And that's me as we gutted Alinea. And it was terrifying, to be honest with you. We didn't know what we were doing. And that's the kitchen. That's what it turned into. But the very first thing we said is we want to set the stage. We want a blank, beautiful table so that when you arrive at our restaurant, you know that there's care, that there is an empty set that we are then going to build your experience upon. So we came up with that very, very simple, empty stage, black table. Think, if you haven't seen Stop Making Sense, watch Stop Making Sense. They build a table, they build a stage. David Byrne, genius, experience builder, they empty the stage. So there's our stage for his food. That's a big problem because one of the things that tablecloths do is they also soak up water. They also have your silverware on them. And what are we going to do with all of that? So when you arrive, unlike most restaurants, where's the flowers? There are no flowers here. There's nothing. There's a napkin. You put it on your lap. You have a blank table. So then it begs the question, what do you do with the silverware? You can't just put it. Health code prevents you from putting silverware on a table. It has to go on a napkin, a placemat. Neither of those are very nice. We worked with a designer named Martin Kastner to build a little pillow, a little porcelain stage for your silverware. But the other thing this does, how many of you have been to a restaurant where they put out all the silverware? You got 4 forks, 4 knives, 2 spoons up there, a spoon fork thing for sauces. Like, it's like we're not in 16th century France. Most of us have no idea what to do with that. I don't. Actually, the rule, I'll tell you, is that you just go outside to in. And then use those when they tell you to, I guess. I don't know. But what we did is that we would present exactly what you need for every course that you're eating. And if the handle's facing this way, you should probably use your left hand. And if your handle's facing that way, you should use your right hand. Really simple solutions. If you're lefty, by the way, we flip those around. We notice. So you have a problem with water. What do you do with water? Condensation. You put ice in a glass, it condensates. Do you use a coaster? Well, that would be one way to do it, but it's not a soigné way to do it, as we like to say. It's not a fancy way to do it. So what we did is we get a refrigerator. We calculate the dew point of the air in the room at that point, which changes by the time. We put the water just above that temperature. Now, no condensation. We just stripped away a problem. Now imagine multiplying that idea of thinking to every aspect of what you guys do when you walk in that restaurant. So let's think about how you're greeted at a restaurant. It's facing over there. Most of the times you walk in a restaurant and we know exactly what there is. There's a podium like that one there. There's someone standing there. He or she has a computer screen in front of them, right? And now they're a gatekeeper. They're the people who are going to either let you in or not let you in. There's no hospitality in that. There's no greeting like you're coming to someone's house like you're an old friend. There is, what's your name? What's your party size? They're not all here. Go sit in the bar. That's not a very welcoming experience. So what we wanted to do is create an incredibly welcoming experience. But rather than doing that by having someone just stand there and greet you, we kind of went the opposite direction. When you walk into Alinea, that's what you see. You see a 40-foot long bare hallway, no marking on the front door, and we want you to think that you might be in the wrong place. Now that doesn't sound very welcoming either, right? But what it does is that just like great theater, just like great movies, just like all great experiences, it creates a little bit of tension and then relieves it. And when you create tension and relieve it, that relief makes that feeling more powerful. This is the basis of theater. This is the basis of video games. This is the basis of every great experience that you have. And so when you walk in the front door of Alinea, you see this false perspective, which I stole from my freshman Colgate class on classical architecture, but inverted it. So all the old cathedrals used to have the opposite, small door, and then you walk in and you feel small before God. Worth studying the classics just for that. So now people walk in here, they think they're in the wrong place. All of a sudden they come in and there's no podium and someone greets them by name. We Google every single person. We know what you look like before you get there. At least we try very hard to. And we say, Mr. Dunn, it's great to see you. How's everything at LatinSchool? Even if that person's never, ever met Randall Dunn. just some shots of the dining room. The stairway. Shortest distance between 2 points is straight line. Architects want a straight stairway. We said, let's make this stairway a journey that makes no sense, so that it feels longer and that you have to take note of the fact that you're going somewhere. Centerpiece, flowers. Why flowers? Why a candle? Are flowers inherently romantic? What's the purpose of them? They don't even smell anymore. Like the kind that you buy in the florist, they're like mass produced. It's like the chickens that grow in 4 weeks. So you put them on the table, and then you're just moving them aside so you can talk to the other people or so the plates can go down. They serve no point. So we started saying, what can we do with centerpieces to make it interesting? This is one of the weirdest ones we ever did. Those are key limes that are put into a piece of plastic piping with stainless steel on the bottom. That's a paint stripping heat gun that's used to take paint off the side of your house that melts that in place. And that sits on the table like that. People sit down, we put those down first thing, walk away, say nothing. What the hell is going on here? And it doesn't even look edible, right? It looks terrible. And then later, after about 2 hours, someone steps up, takes a specially designed tool, and puts fresh lime juice over a guava dessert. That suddenly became a powerful thing. It's created a sense of wonder. What are you doing? What are these things for? And then, boom, there it is. At the end, you go, oh my God, that was there right in front of me all along. It's like a magic trick that you see happen in front of you, right? So I'm just going to go through a few of these. Anybody got a guess as to what that idea is? We have a small group here, so I feel like I can talk with you instead of at you. Anybody guess? What? Yeah. So that is Wagyu beef from Kobe, Japan, that was put into a custom sort of like chopstick holder that was tempered, or not tempered, frozen in liquid nitrogen and left to temper throughout your meal. That is a rosemary centerpiece that then is taken off the table, put onto a 400-degree brick with lamb that cooks in front of you, and the heat from the brick takes the rosemary that's been sitting in front of you and uses your olfactory to scent and flavor the lamb. This is a tripod of hibiscus tea as a dessert, and it's put in front of you, and then as you grab it, it folds and becomes a lollipop. Very childlike. All of these designs are designed to confront you, make you a little bit uncomfortable. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable. You put that in front of somebody and you say, eat that without using your hands, and you're in a Michelin 3-star restaurant. Very weird, very uncomfortable, right? But here's the little secret about Alinea. Anytime we ask you to do something that makes you uncomfortable, the bite that you're going to take, even though it might look scary, is comfort food. So again, just like the front hallway, we give you a little challenge, and then we give you a reward. If we're jumping off the high board, the water is warm. If we have weird food, they usually put it on a plate. Make it real easy for you to dive in. That looks really scary, right? It's basically pound cake with spun sugar. It's like apple pie. It's like the easiest thing in the world to eat, but it looks like it's going to cut your mouth up, right? So it's all very, very, very calculated to create experiences that you haven't had in other restaurants, because from the time you are 2 years old and you can hold a fork or a knife, you do this. And you shovel it in and you don't think, and you're not forced to pause and take note of the moment in your life. And so we did all these things, and I'm going to skip ahead a little bit just because there's so many of them. I'll talk a little bit about this one. Grant grew up in Michigan, and his parents and grandparents used to rake leaves in the street. Back then, you were allowed to just burn the leaves, and so there was a really sense that fall came with this scent of pumpkin pie and burning leaves. And if you're my age, that has a real like sense of time and place for you. And so Grant did this dish, which was pheasant with burning oak leaves. And the oak leaves would go into the dining room, and people have literally smelled this and cried because it took them back to their childhood. So 18 months after we opened, we were named the best restaurant in America. We succeeded in creating experiences for people that were truly unique. This is when we took that experience on the road to 11 Madison Park in New York City. We wanted to convert a very grand Michelin 3-star restaurant into the Midwest. And so we got rid of all their fancy flowers. We literally washed and dried hundreds of bales of leaves from Michigan, and we asked all the diners when they got there to throw them on the floor. Because it's the worst thing you could do at a restaurant like 11 Madison Park in New York is make a filthy mess of the floor. But by the end, when people were walking out, it was like a forest floor. It was really beautiful. So 18 months after we opened, on opening night, that's us on opening night, that is 10 years ago next week, Sunday, that guy in the middle was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. He was told to have his tongue cut out. He was told that he would live at best 2 years, that he would never eat or taste again. So you go from a pinnacle experience, for him essentially living out all of his dreams, to being told that you're 34 years old and you will die. And worse, you will die a grisly death, not being able to do what you love to do. What experience do you choose for yourself then? First day of chemotherapy. Grant chose to write a book because he wanted to get down all of these ideas in that form. But I have to tell you, 5 doctors told us, and I was there, that there was no alternative, that he must have his tongue cut off, that he must have disfiguring surgery. And instead he said, no, I'm willing to die a dignified death instead. And then I started reading, and I found doctors right here in our backyard at the University of Chicago who themselves looked at the experience of creating a cancer treatment completely differently. How? Why? Well, you know, if someone doesn't want to have their tongue cut off, don't have it cut off. It's so basic. Try something else. And our entire lives, people say, nope, this is what you have to do, and you listen to it. And we didn't listen to that. And so he went through pretty much pure hell with a great attitude. He missed 9 days of work. He lost 50 pounds. And he came through that cancer-free, with a tongue, and that protocol that he now pioneered with those doctors is now the standard treatment and becoming the standard treatment in the country for head and neck cancer. So we are intimately involved with the University of Chicago. I'm on the Board of Biological Sciences there, and I'm not a doctor. And we just said, treat that the same way that we treated the restaurant. Ask the really basic questions. Why are those tablecloths there? Why are you cutting out this guy's tongue? They're actually the same question. So then we ended up building a couple more places with the same thoughts. We built the Aviary, which is a bar, and we started making drinks that look like that. The Aviary was just named, again, the best bar in America this week, actually. Daily Meal, top 150 bars in the country. That's a drink in the rocks. You'll get there in a couple of years. I know no Latin students ever have alcohol, I know. And that's a Bloody Mary. So we then built next restaurant, a restaurant that changes every 4 months. And I started rethinking how you book restaurants. Now I'm running a software company. And what's really interesting every day is that as I go in and I have 10 engineers building software, we are asking the exact same questions. What is the experience that people have? What is their interaction? How can we surprise them? How can we make them feel comfortable by first making them feel a little uncomfortable? How can your clicks on a phone be the same as that experience that we're creating at our restaurants every night? So I tell you, those are the questions that you need to ask. And I know, having known some of these folks here, every single thing that they're doing is the exact same thing as what we're doing. It just so happens that it's at a restaurant. Thank you very much.